just give yourself the permission. You don't have to keep running throughout your day to do stuff because you're probably not going to the gym also. You're finding all these other areas to not go and take care of yourself. It's okay to take 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and just breathe deeply, hug your knees into your chest. Just see how you feel.
Welcome to Guys Talking Yoga, a podcast created to help inspire more men to consider the practice of yoga by sharing the many stories and paths of other guys. I'm your host, Derek Vanderwarker.
And I am your co-host, Larry Milburn. And today, Derek, we are going to tackle the question of why yoga for guys.
Nice.
We have certainly entertained this conversation for a long time. Both of us, we go over it together. We have talks with our own friends about it. So let's get into it today because really not enough guys are out there doing yoga. And we both feel strongly that they would benefit a lot by starting a practice.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So why are guys missing out if they are not practicing yoga?
I tell you, and you and I have hit this before in previous conversations, just in our own catch-ups, but like either they don't see the benefits or know of the benefits.
Yep.
Or they have some aversion and reluctance to explore and try this stuff.
I think it starts with that.
It could be both.
And then it's the other thing.
All right. Well,
right?
What do you think is the biggest reason why guys are reluctant to get into it or have some aversion from starting a practice?
I think right off the bat, they see a physical limitation, and it's usually that they're not flexible. That's the most common thing that I get.
Because they see this stuff online and they say somebody
they see someone's crazy Instagram feed, or they've heard about it through a friend or a spouse or a wife or whatever, and they think there's no way they could possibly go do this. They can't touch their... First thing, I get a lot of I can't touch my toes. I'm not flexible.
There's a lot of guys out there who can't touch their toes.
Right. I'm not flexible. I can't do yoga. That's the sentence I get the most.
Yep.
Then it gets into I don't want to sit there and stare at my belly button and get all woo-woo and kumbaya and stuff like that, which, there's a lot of classes out there that do that, but there are also a lot of classes that do not do that stuff. So, but those are usually the first two things. It's flexibility and an aversion to the kumbaya.
I 100% agree with you on that. I think when it comes to the benefits, like if you've had conversations with pals and friends like I have, and you've mentioned yoga, do you find that a lot of them just, even beyond the fact that they can't touch their toes or beyond the fact they got super tight hamstrings, what do you think they don't see? What is it they don't see about the benefits? Like, if they're like, hey, it helps make you flexible, like they just don't seem to really always connect on why.
I think as guys, we're not concerned necessarily at first about being flexible. It's about power with us, right? So the idea of going to the gym or doing that makes a lot more sense. And they don't see that being flexible and becoming more body aware, because I don't believe to an extent that your body awareness raises because you go to the gym. Just because you lift weights doesn't mean you're aware of your body. You're not all guys, quite frankly, are aware of how they are lifting those weights. Yeah. And that will lead to an injury eventually. There is one other type of guy excuse that I get, and I'm sure you've heard this as well. When I tried a yoga class years ago and I hurt my whatever, and it's just not for me. I get that a lot as well.
Like they pulled a muscle or whatever.
Yeah, probably because they went too hard.
Yep.
They tried to keep up with whomever, and so now they have that other aversion to going to class, right? Yep.
Or they have a pre-existing injury and they just don't want to make things worse.
That's right. And they think that bending or twisting or whatever in a certain shape is going to tweak that thing.
Yep.
So I think that's what keeps guys out of it. And it's very tough to get them back into it. It usually takes like years later to get them back into it when they're older. Yeah. And they come broken.
I think not realizing the fact that it can really help them. And when I say help, it's like, if somebody has weak hips, or they don't even know they're weak hips, or a weak back, or some weak muscles, I don't think they see yoga as being something that's actually going to help make them stronger. Mm-hmm. They might say, okay, I get the flexibility, but they don't realize it makes them stronger. And the way it's helping them get them stronger is actually working more of those muscles in the joints that are probably not getting used sitting all day. Or even if you go do a few squats at the gym, for the most part, those legs are only moving in one direction in those movements. Yeah. So I think the strength thing is one that's totally underappreciated by most.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think, the next step is breathing. Most of us out there, guy, gal, anything in between, hold our breath throughout a lot of situations and encounters and throughout the day. And once you remember how to breathe properly, that has incredible benefits on its own.
Yeah. I think just Novak Djokovic, who obviously recognized for his accomplishments on the tennis court, considered by many to be the greatest tennis player of all time, certainly perhaps of his generation. Huge yoga guy, loves doing yoga. And he just did, I saw a comment online of him talking about becoming aware of the breath on the court, what you do. I think yoga can absolutely not only make you stronger and more flexible in ways like Djokovic, but also be able to tap into that breath when you're hitting a tennis ball, when you're taking steps down a trail, whatever you're doing, just being able to dial in and check in your breath and understand your awareness and where you're at.
That's right. It's interesting if you watch pro athletes, let's take basketball, for example, before they free throw, there's usually a big exhale that they take, right? Before a tennis serve, usually a big exhale. But you don't really think about the breathing then after that point when you throw the free throw and game on, or you serve the tennis ball and game on.
Yep.
Right? So learning how to breathe whilst being active and encountering challenges on the court, on the field, in life, that's a huge part of it.
Yep. And then lifting, the more that I've gotten into breath work as a way to work your core and your diaphragm and really your pelvis, I am much more safe and cautious in lifting, especially with heavier weight. And you become to realize how to make your weightlifting aspect of your fitness more efficient and more useful with each repetition. So in high school, you probably were the same way. Like in high school, it was all about benching, and it was all about holding your breath as you put up the 245 or whatever it was. And you never really thought much about your breath other than holding your breath to protect your core and your back and act like you actually were stronger than you thought you were.
That's right. And truthfully, when you start to breathe and you become more aware of your breath and your body and whatnot, then you become more aware of yourself sort of in space and time. And that's when you also hear those stories of athletes who learn to sort of slow the game down for themselves and become more effective.
Yep.
And that's not just reserved for athletes,
Yep.
right? That's reserved for really anyone who dives into this practice. Again, and you take it out into life, you can learn not to react right away and be a bit better of a functioning human.
That's right. Well, speaking of functioning humans, it seems like everyone is stressed out these days, no matter what human you're running into or talking to.
Really?
Right, really? It's a super tool to use with dealing with stress and anxiety. And I think the breath work that you develop and facilitate in doing certain yoga poses, actually all yoga poses, can help you deal with understanding your anxiety and stress when you're off the mat and whatever you're doing. And it could be a stressful situation like you're stuck in traffic that's more acute, like this is a stressful moment, or something that's more a chronic stressful thing, dealing with a job you don't love, or dealing with family stuff, or dealing with anything that's put you in an existential box that's really stressing you out. The ability to have a yoga practice, roll out the mat, learn how to do some breathing, check in with your body. Again, it's another underappreciated aspect about yoga that I think many are missing out on. To be able to have 10 or 20 minutes to do that can really be helpful in dealing with the rest of your day, the rest of your week.
That's right. And let's not forget the third aspect that many guys out there may want to tap into, and many guys may not be interested in taking that far, is the spiritual aspect of yoga. And there is a huge swath, deep reservoir of that is available should you want to go down that path as well, or scratch that itch, as it were. And that can be very beneficial as well. And I know you and I talk about the community around yoga and the community around this podcast. And that's a big piece of it as well. Going to class every week or every couple of days during the week, and you see the same people in the studio or whatnot, and you talk about some of these things, and you learn a new pose from somebody, or you get an idea about a book to read or something to listen to, is a huge part of it. And I think with everybody's current stress levels out there, it's important to find those community members that you can lean on and talk to and just voice your own opinion about things, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think another aspect of, you see polls out there, there's less and less people who would say that they are religious. They would say, I'm spiritual but not religious. And, a lot of churches are seeing a decline in attendance all over the country, not just here, in Europe, other places. And I think yoga is starting to fill some of that gap for people. Maybe not exactly on Sunday morning, although there are articles out there and stories about churches in major cities kind of moving away from the religious aspect and being places where they have yoga classes and things like that. But also I think in the gaps in the moments throughout your week, rolling out the mat becomes a little bit of a spiritual practice of just putting aside time for yourself to just check in and see what's going on. I mean, you might not even get out of just lying on the mat. You might be just needing a moment to kind of just take a minute and take a breath because you're moving at light speed. Yep. So I think this in the spiritual thing also, obviously super subjective.
That's right.
I think just having something that's for you and a chance to connect with yourself at its most minute is the sort of the seedling of having a spiritual practice. And as you were saying, the community and going to a yoga studio. I mean, there's obviously you can do any yoga anywhere you want, but the opportunity to go to a studio and have a community, like you said, see some new faces, get a bit of repetition with faces, with whether it's the instructor or whether or not you're the instructor with students. There's something nice about having that community, and especially in this day and age where everyone's spending less time with humans.
That's right. I started teaching during COVID, basically. Got certified to teach during COVID. And for me, it was not only a chance to give back this amazing practice has done so much for me, yes, but also because I wanted to have something grounding in my week that I always went back to. And I still feel that way. So the rhythm of like coming back to my studio up in Litchfield that I teach at every week helps me tremendously. And I'm also thinking, it forces me to think about yoga throughout the week as well. And what I'm going to teach, how I'm going to teach, what I want to talk about, and those sorts of things. So I sort of firsthand know and understand. I'm not a religious person, and this is the thing that has spoken to me the most. And that community of students that I find and other teachers when I pass them in the hall when we're switching classes has been great.
Yeah, I to swing it back to, we think about the pandemic and everyone being kind of isolated. If you were in a relationship or with a family, I know at the time, I didn't have a family at the time, but I know that was very stressful and hard on people being kind of locked in. Apparently the divorce rate might have creeped up a little bit during COVID, from what I hear. And then also if you were someone who was on their own during COVID, you're isolated as well. So certainly mental health was something that the country's become much more aware of since coming out of COVID. Obviously, Jonathan Haidt's book about the
anxious generation,
about being connected on phones. And I want to get back to, on that topic, that book was obviously about a lot of these younger people having challenges, but even guys at midlife. A big inspiration for me to do this podcast, get it started, was trying to connect yoga with guys at midlife, because I really could connect with and relate to guys who are in their 40s or 50s who are, as we talked about, physical challenges. They're not moving their bodies as much. They've got, the ghosts of their high school or college injuries are coming back to haunt them, whether it's stress fractures or it's, torn ACLs or, Achilles, or that you just had a bad back for years that really dogged you. And I think that stuff starts to wear on you because you have less energy, you're more tired, your body's not moving as efficient because all these little compromises in your body because of those injuries. So guys get stuck in that place. They might have pain as a result of that stuff. So they pop a Tylenol or an Advil, or a beer or a whiskey, or maybe they pop a few edibles. And you start to realize that those types of solutions for dealing with the physical stuff, pain, is not a great long-term strategy. And I'm sort of amazed to hear how many guys have really struggled with alcohol, either friends from years ago or friends that I've met in the last 10 years. And so to get to it, the mental health issue is something that I also think is sort of always existing, but more prevalent amongst guys are in our age group who probably have families with their partners and spouses. They're taking care of their sick and dying, aging parents. They have less options in their career. You can't quite go drop X to go become Y because you and your family have a certain type of revenue that you need to have, or income rather. And so I think a lot of guys feel stuck. And I think there's not a lot of healthy ways to address that. And I know you and I both agree that yoga can be great for guys who are either struggle with addiction, guys who struggle with depression, guys who struggle with a lot of anxiety and shut down. And you wouldn't think that rolling out a yoga mat would be this thing that solves it all. And of course it doesn't, but it does start to help you get tuned into knowing how you feel and knowing what's going on in your mind. And if you get into a yoga practice and you start to go into yoga studios, you start to meet, I think, other healthy guys who are developing the similar healthy habit of yoga and other things related.
Yeah, for sure. And I just want to bounce back to the, spiritual practice, religious thing. They are not necessarily mutually exclusive, right? So like you can be, Judeo-Christian, you can be Muslim, whatever you want to be, and practice that and do that thing and have a yoga practice, right? You're not ditching your Catholicism to go be a yogi.
Yeah.
Right. They can both inform each other, but certainly if you find yourself more spiritual than religious, this might be something, again, that as you get into it more and you find the spiritual stuff about it, might begin to open up a path for you to follow that.
Absolutely. Right.
So, yeah. So I think that's an important note to put out there, because I think there are some folks who are certainly more religious, and that might be like, well, I'm already this, so I can't be that.
Yep.
And that leads to who knows what that leads to.
God knows what.
On that really quick, it's amazing to think that yoga's been around for 2,500 years. It's older than Islam, and it's older than Christianity.
Well, certainly, I think to your point, it pairs really well with other religions. It pairs well with agnostics and atheists. I think it pairs well with Western thinking about psychology and mental health. It pairs well with Jungian psychology. There's just something about really learning how to connect with your body, learning how to map your nervous system to what you feel in your body, even if it's not necessarily what you want to feel, at least you feel that. And from my experience, the more time you spend on the mat, not necessarily time in a given practice, like 2 hours per se, but just time that you commit and allocate over the course of months, years, pretty soon you realize you have more agency and control for how you feel and your reaction to things. And that might be as simple as learning how to do a better squat when you're in the gym. That might be learning how to not react to relationships in your life that tend to give you aggravation or stress, or also help you to think beyond the box you put yourself in for your career or people's perceptions of your career. I mean, I think when you realize like it's just this endless unfolding of learning who you are and who you're not, you can take that journey into your 70s or 80s and actually hopefully be in a good place when that path ends. I mean, it's just a constantly evolving and giving practice that works with so many things.
Yeah. And again, it is a practice. I tell my students, I think I said this in our interviews, right? This is yoga practice. This is not yoga perfect. And I think we've done a good job of illustrating today that you can go as deep here as you want. We've covered a lot. And I think just get all that stuff out of your head that we just talked about. Try to get to a class, put on a video, roll out a yoga mat or roll out a towel, or just get on your floor, hug your knees into your chest for 10 minutes. Give yourself that. I think the other thing in my Yoga for Dudes stuff that I talk about is like, just give yourself the permission, right? You don't have to keep running throughout your day to do stuff because you're probably not going to the gym also. You're finding all these other areas to not go and take care of yourself. It's okay to take care of yourself. It's okay to take 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and just breathe deeply, hug your knees into your chest. Just see how you feel.
Yeah,
a lot of it's noticing, right? Like yoga is a
Yes.
lot of noticing. And the other thing about, what is yoga? Why yoga for guys? We could boil it down to a simple answer, but you can also see from this little episode here, we could keep going because we're constantly asking, like, what is yoga? What is the thing? I think it's very personal for a lot of people. I think the last 3 years of interviews, if you went back and listened, it's very personal for people. No one's got the same answer.
Yeah, and also I think some people probably don't even have their own definition of it. They just something that they do. Other people will be probably perhaps more introspective and really speak to what it is for them and what it means.
That's right.
You're never going to know until you start doing it and start exploring it. And I think for a lot of guys who haven't quite jumped into this stuff, you got to buy your own yoga mat. You got to really, start committing to going and checking out the studio in town and find a space at home that works for you. I mean, that is a challenge. I mean, I just moved from the city out to Connecticut and, finding the space even in my own house to just roll out the mat where you don't have distractions, where you don't put your leg out and find that your right leg does not have enough space to actually stretch out because you're hitting the couch. So you just got to find those places in your space. So anyhow, I think this is just the tip of the iceberg for us getting into this stuff. If you couldn't tell already by listening to this, there's a lot of different directions and avenues to go with these conversations. I think there's a whole swim lane around the physical benefits. Mm-hmm. There's another little swim lane around mental benefits. And then the third, spiritual benefits, which again are probably harder to really put a thumb on. Mm-hmm. But if you develop the feel and the knowing in your body and you are open to where things go and how things are, it's hard not to see some kind of spiritual connection to this, even if it's a lowercase s. So Larry, I'm psyched you're on board to join us this season and to take this thing to the next level with the podcast. And I know you and I have talked about a number of great guests that we're going to bring on this year.
Yeah.
And have a lot of great conversations about specific yoga topics and also adjacent topics.
It's very cool. Again, thank you for inviting me to come on the show as a co-host. It means a lot. And it means a lot to be able to spread this word some more and to get the interest out there and to help more people and more guys get into this thing. So thank you for that. And again, we really want to hear from you guys this year, especially. So feel free to send us an email, info@gtypodcast.com. Follow us on Instagram, all the places, and tell your friends.
Absolutely. And by the way, the website, GTY Podcast, there's some recommendations on gear, yoga mats and blocks. There's recommendations on books. There's recommendations on studios across the country, teachers across the country. And that will just continue to be more of a resource for people looking for more and places to go and how to deepen and broaden your practice. Anyhow, thanks again for listening on this stuff. And we look forward to talking to you guys more this fall. Remember to follow and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
We'll see you on the mat.